Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Learn Like a CPA show. I'm your host, Ryan Bakey, and today we're going to be talking about the midterm rental loophole. It's something that I've been kind of throwing around in Facebook groups and forums and things like that, but I actually addressed it in my tax strategy bootcamp. So just stay tuned and we'll see recordings from that tax strategy bootcamp.
So for tax strategies for midterm rentals, there's a similar loophole, similar to the STR, but not quite the same. And so if your average stay is 30 days or less and you provide significant personal services with rental, then the activity is not considered a rental activity and the passive loss limitations do not apply. So you are able to use the losses to offset your active income. And so to determine if personal services are significant, we have to take into consideration the frequency of the services, the type and amount of labor required to perform the services, and the value of the services relative to the amount charged for the use of the property. And so some examples of personal services would be like cleaning, and I don't mean between bookings, it's like a weekly cleaning. If you provide cooking or like chef services, personal training. Can you think of any other examples, Ryan?
Yeah, I think cleaning while the guest is staying there would probably be a big one, I would say. So if you have a 30-day month-to-month rental, let's say, by typical definition, if you talk to a lot of accountants, they're going to say that that's a passive activity. But what we found in the tax code is that if you have an average of 30 days or less stay and you provide those personal services, along with meeting one of the 7 material participation tests, just like the short-term rental loophole works, you can also take any midterm rental losses against your W-2 or your 1099 without having to qualify as a real estate professional. But I would say one thing about this is you want to make sure that the cost of those services isn't exceeding whatever expected tax benefits that you're going to get from implementing this strategy. Like if you have to now go in there and clean once a week, or you have to provide food for them or take out the trash, like if those costs are going to exceed whatever you would save in taxes, then you may not want to implement the strategy. But what's cool about the midterm rental loophole is if I go back to, where's this slide at? If I go back to this slide that I showed yesterday, and let's say this long-term rental number 2 is a mid, let's say this short-term rental is a midterm rental instead. I have income, and then I have a loss. Well, that loss, if it's passive, remember, it can only go towards offsetting my other passive income. But if I have a midterm rental and I meet this midterm rental loophole requirement, I can actually use my midterm rental to offset my W-2 or my 1099 income. So it makes investing in midterm rentals a lot more lucrative than they were before. I think we have a question. Anurag, I think that's how you pronounce your name. I'm not sure what your question is. Do you want to come off mute, maybe?
Yeah. Hey, Ryan. My question was, does owning and maintaining a midterm rental count as another job or active work by my employer?
By your employer?
I mean, if I work, I have a W-2 income, and if I have a contract saying that I'm going to be only doing this job, does owning a midterm rental go against that?
I mean, I think that's between you and your employer, right?
I just wanted to see if that's on a general viewpoint, if you know about it.
Are you talking about like if your employer allows you to have outside activities other than your W-2 job?
Just giving an example, I'm on H-1B, so I'm supposed to have to be tied, my income, my active to be tied with my employer on an H-1B. So
I see what you're saying.
short-term rental is clearly not. It does medium-term rental count as that?
No, I wouldn't say so. Now, don't get me wrong. It's going to take a lot of years and time for them to hash out like even short-term rentals, for example, right? It's from a tax perspective, they're considered non-passive. You could use those to offset your income, but from a H-1B visa standpoint or like from an employer standpoint, I would still be looking to classify those as a passive investment. So I don't think you have much to worry about.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah. Here's another question. Please define exactly what qualifies as a midterm rental. So a midterm rental, generally speaking, the lingo that a lot of people throw out there is not a year-long lease, but some form of an extended lease. So like a lot of times it'll be for insure. Like let's say a family's house burns down, and the insurance company gives them money to go rent somewhere while their house is getting rebuilt. That's typically a midterm rental. So that family is going to move in there they're going to sign like a month-to-month lease, or maybe they sign like a 6-month lease. That's a typical midterm rental. Or sometimes you have, like I've done it before in my properties where I've had a nurse come and stay for 3 months. I've had contractors that are building in the area come and stay on a month-to-month basis. So those are like midterm rental, if you call it like midterm rental bookings. I don't know if you have any other examples, Liz, but for purposes of the loophole, though, it has to be a 30-day or less average contract stay. So it'd have to be like a month-to-month lease. You couldn't sign a 6-month lease or a year-long lease, right?
Yeah, I think the midterm rental loophole, it's probably, like beneficial for landlords that are running like a hybrid model, like short-term rental combined with midterm rental, because I know some people do that, some landlords. But with midterm rentals, yeah, I mean, they can go, the lease could go for over a year, but they're typically between a month and I've seen it like 6 months or something like that. But yeah, like insurance claims, travel nurses. I've students that are coming from out of state or country, like if you're close to a university, or even like professors that are, just teaching that one semester, families that are relocating from out of state, contractors.
So I would say that, and the trick though, if you're going to have like a professor that's going to teach a semester at school, the trick would be to put him or her on a month-to-month lease, not a 6-month 6-month lease, right? The midterm rental, Damien, it would have to be a 30-day or less stay. So you would have to do month-to-month lease, or you had to do a month-to-month contract with whoever's staying there. But also, what I think matters is if you had I could see it being pretty, I don't want to say easy, but like I'll give you an example. I had a property where I think from I want to say April to October. I would say September or October. It was rented out as a short-term rental. So I had a bunch of like 2 or 3 day stays for that time period. And then from October to March, I rented it out on a month-to-month basis, right? So let's say 30-day stay. So when you combine everything together, that drops this below a 30-day average, right? Because I'm mixing the 30-day stays with a bunch of 2 and 3 day stays. And in fact, I might even be below the 7-day average if I have enough short-term rental bookings. So it's just literally a loophole to the loophole. If some of you have, especially like properties in the Midwest where they're kind of multi-purpose, like you might have them as a short-term rental for part of the year, and then you might switch them over to month-to-month leases. No, I don't think it. The average guess. I don't think it has to be different tenants every 30 days. No, is that what you heard, Elizabeth, or no? It could be the same tenant, just has to be a 30-day
30.
lease, right? Yeah.
Mhm. And so other things that midterm rentals need to keep in mind, and this applies to all midterm rental operators, not only the ones that are using like a hybrid model, is that if you were purchasing a property and you're renovating it, I would say to make sure to itemize the cost, because we have clients that just give us like a total, like, oh, I spent 60K renovating the property. Well, if we don't have a breakdown, it's hard for us to know if there is anything that we can potentially like bonus depreciate. And so like if you install new flooring, that's a 5-year life asset. So we could bonus depreciate. So I would make sure to itemize. And if someone else did the work, make sure to ask for an itemized invoice as well. And yeah. And after the property is placed in service, you can take advantage of the de minimis election and routine maintenance safe harbor election. And for the de minimis election, it allows you to expense the cost of assets that are $2,500 or less per item or invoice. And so that would be like appliances, bed frames, even like a new couch. So I think take that into consideration if you're planning, like, 'cause you could place your property in service, maybe get a lease and like rent it out a month or two or whatever, and then decide to change the appliances. And at that point, if they are below 2,500, then you're able to expense it. But if you buy the assets before you place a property in service, then you have to capitalize them. And then for the routine maintenance safe harbor election, it allows you to deduct cost or routine maintenance rather than capitalize and depreciate them over time. And examples of that would be like painting, cleaning, or minor repairs.
How would you balance like, because of midterm rental, it pretty much has to be fully furnished, ready to go, or no, would you say, compared to a short-term rental?
I would say it depends who you're trying to target, because if, let's say that you're trying to target students and you rent by room, then maybe you wait to furnish the last room, or maybe you get someone in there, one room, or maybe you get a contract where it's only one tenant, and so they're only going to need one room at that point. Just get that tenant in there, and then once they move out, you can finish furnishing the whole property.
Yeah, it's like a balancing act, right? Because we really want to try to go live as soon as possible, so that way we can expense a lot of those costs as de minimis. Mm-hmm. And Austin's going to talk a little bit more about that later, but obviously with like midterm rentals or short-term rentals, we have to have it pretty much furnished before we're able to put up our Airbnb listing. So it's kind of like a fine balance between, I don't want to say the bare minimum, but do as much as you need to before the property goes live. And then maybe in the down months or when it's not as busy, like come in there and install some of the other items.
Yeah. And so for like, that I have the midterm rental in, Chicago Ridge. I want to make the basement like a game room or just like a family room, but I had a tenant move in and I still haven't furnished the basement. I just left it because they don't really need it. It was just, like dad and 2 daughters. So I just placed it in service, and then once I move out, I'll go back and finish.
Right. Yeah, I think for from like my understanding, like midterm rentals will throw off way more cash flow than a regular long-term rental would. And you get the tax benefits of similar to like a short-term rental. Because that's the main difference, right? For if somebody's working a W-2 and investing in real estate, odds are if they're buying long-term rentals, they're not going to get any tax benefits. But some people don't want to buy short-term rentals because it's a lot of work. So that hybrid, like right in the middle there, is midterm because they can get a little bit more cash flow than dealing with a long-term rental, and they get the tax benefits as if they were investing in a short-term rental, right? I think it's like the best of both worlds, honestly. Do you have any like tools for people who are interested in midterm rentals? Like, what are some of the tools to find good areas to buy midterm rentals, or like how do you actually rent those out?
Um, so I use like Furnish Finder stats. And I get a lot of information from Jesse Vasquez,
Hmm.
so he used to use like Furnish Finder stats to, because it gives you the option to like search a city and tell you how many properties are in the area and then how many people are actually searching for that zip code or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and then with midterm rentals, I think it requires a lot of contacting. Like I think you have to like contact, like if you're targeting insurance claims, then yes, like I posted on Airbnb and Furnish Finder, Facebook or whatever, but it also requires you to like follow up. It's not like, like even if an insurance, like a relocation specialist contacts you, sometimes they don't reply and you constantly have to like be on top of them. So it does require a little bit of work, but it's good cash flow.
Yeah. And somebody said, and it doesn't count as another job. Somebody asked, how do you prove that you provided services? Do you write it out in your listing, or um, like
I mean,
break it down on
I
an
would
invoice?
I would say it could be part of your lease and even on your listing, because that might be the reason why they booked your place because they were expecting that service. So I think that's when you will let them know that you're providing that service, but also because the midterm rentals, even if they reach out to you through Airbnb, and every like MTR operator is different, but even like with me, if they reach me out through Airbnb, I still have them sign a lease, especially if they're going to be there uh, longer than a month. So
Mhm.
you can also list it there.
Somebody had a good point. Would it be sufficient to have in your digital guidebook the ability for the guest to add a service? I would venture to say that it's not enough to have the guest add on the service. If we're trying to implement the midterm rental loophole, I would think that you would need to put in your listing the fact that somebody's going to come in and clean that property or provide those services as part of, like Elizabeth was saying, as part of the booking. Those services are going to be provided to the guest. But what do you think?
I agree with you.
Hmm. Now, I would say if the guest refuses those services, that's a whole different. Like, if you say, "Hey, the cleaner's coming in this Friday to clean it. Are you going to be at work or are you going to be out?" and they refuse it, then that's a different conversation. But I think and the reason why we say we think, or this is our understanding, is because it's a very new strategy that's kind of developed, and it hasn't necessarily gone to tax court yet. So that's why we're giving you guys general guidelines to follow based on our interpretation of the tax code. Can we have them pay that extra fee for the cleaning and list that in the lease agreement? Yeah, exactly. I would definitely put it in terms in writing in the lease agreement saying there's going to be a clean every week or every other week. And then some of the others, what do we call them? Personal services, right? Did anybody have a question for us?
I do, Ryan, real quick. And I hate to ask this boring question after that great conversation with Hawaii, but just real quick on the midterm with the 30-day lease, I just want to make sure compliance wise, do we need to have them sign a new lease every 30 days or just in our lease have it say it goes to month until whatever? How are you doing that in action?
I don't think they're signing a new lease. I think it is, like you just said, it's month to month. So I'll show you. Have you ever done a month to month lease?
Not for short term or midterms.
Okay.
Just I've had it where on my long term where it just says the expiration is whatever date, and then it'll automatically go to month to month.
Yeah, I have a month to month lease on one of my properties right now. I was trying to pull up what my lease looks like, but yeah, it says in the lease agreement, it pretty much what the lease agreement says is it expires at the end of the month, and then the tenant or the guest, however you want to call them paying the rent on the first of the month, like reestablishes the lease again, pretty much. So at any point that they don't pay at the end of the month or the first of the month, whatever that date is, it makes the lease like null, pretty much. That's how mine is set up.
Do you have like an expiration date though? So because you want to keep rebooking once they're planning on exiting, I mean, do you have some type of date that they're going to, at least how long they're going to stay? Because you want to keep putting it out on your calendar to rebook it so you're not having months after they leave.
Yeah, I mean, in a midterm, in your situation, I would probably put an expiration date on there. What I was saying is, like, I just have a traditional long-term rental. So I don't really care if he stays longer than however long, because at least I know in the state of Illinois, like we have to give them a 60-day notice before we want to cancel a lease. So if I think I can like raise rents or for whatever reason, I would probably let my tenant know, like, I'm going to plan on raising rents in 2 months. And then if he says, well, I don't want to pay that, then I could give him a 60-day notice pretty much.
Yeah, okay, I got that with the long terms, but so for the midterm though, even though you're saying it's month to month and as they pay, but are you still having some type of expiration originally?
I mean, I would it depends on the goal of the property. Is this a property that is just going to be a midterm rental, or is it going to be,
Yes. Yeah, midterm.
Yes. If it's just a midterm rental, then I wouldn't put an expiration date on it. Depending on the state law. But if remember that example I showed of how I have a property that I rent it out as a short term in the summer and I midterm rent it in the fall and the winter, like I would put the expiration date right before short term rental season.
Okay. And then but the actual lease agreement to make it 30-day leases or whatever to be able to be in compliance with the 30-day. That's where I'm getting kind of stuck.
You could do that all in the same lease agreement. I would just work with a contract law attorney that can help you draft that in your state, because each state's different for that. So you just want to make sure that you're not like violating people.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So it would be a 30-day lease, month to month. As long as they pay, it keeps renewing. And then, but the expiration date, if you wanted to put an expiration date in there, you could. So.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi.
I might have missed this. I'm sorry. Regarding the services provided, is it the same as, like a short term? Is it hours coming into, to play with that? Any more services or hours or time more than anyone else within the business, an active participant? Is that the same, or can we just hire a cleaner?
That is the same, the 100-hour rule.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's the same rules of
Short term.
Yeah, I had this. It's that same material participation test from our understanding. Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting is, so if we had a couple in an area that I do all the active participation because it's local, but we have a midterm in a further away market, as long as I'm doing more than that cleaner, we're still in the ballpark. We could still make that work.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, no problem.